Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And let's welcome wholeheartedly Alex from Canada, who will continue to build wellness centers. No, I mean continue to elevate us in the teaching. Thank you, Alex. Obviously, you're touching souls across this planet. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And we never know, as Mr. Kesh said, where our words or a little thing we say may open up a key. And apparently the souls are working together more than we actually realize it. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your sharing today.
And thank you, Mark. This is so true. We never know what, how far our fields extend. And yes, this is the North American team meeting. And so I want to welcome everybody to this meeting. But as we can see that the fields of energies transcend the continents. And when you look at the list of the panelists here, you see that we have an extremely strong contingent from Central and South America and from Europe and other continents as well. And so we appreciate all of you being here, because collectively it builds up the strength of the energy fields. And this is very important, because what we're talking about is the Kesh Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We're at the intermediate inner space level. Today's topic is sequencing. And my name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is February the 5th, 2023. This is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. Please fasten your seatbelts. We are going into deeper inner space. And so we've covered basic inner space, where we've seen the boundaries and the nebulous space and all spaces in between. And then now we're into the intermediate inner space, which is following the other intermediate series of teaching, understanding, knowing, insight, and earth space. And it's trying to condense the over 6,000 hours of teaching and understand that this is not only for new students, but also for mature students, because we need the mature students to teach the new students. We are outnumbered by new potential students. And this becomes very important. It's part of the sequence because we are undergoing changes. And if we don't go in sequence, then it becomes chaotic. So a lot of people think that life on this planet is chaotic. But as we found out from the three amigos, that the soul of the earth and the soul of the earth body work together to create the physical earth body. And somehow we've come from outer space and we have this earth space, and in between is this inner space. And so we're still searching for this outer space because we don't really know where it is. But somehow we've come here because we have this sentimental pie in the sky that we call Earth, and it's part of our universe. But it's a little tiny part. And it's ignoring the vastness of the rest of the part. And so to try and broaden our understanding of this, when reading the three books, The Universal Order of Creation of Matters, that's book number 1, we see that it's an amalgamation of different energy fields that come together and constitute the source. And in book number 3, we see that that source can break up into other sources to constitute the origin of the universe. And so we see that our soul is part of that process. So what links that together with our soul? And then so in book number 2, The Structure of the Light, brilliantly describes this and how it's linked together. And in order to understand that, we have to understand the sequence. And we discussed this in a past class. And we have to transcend limitations, because everything that we're looking at is really from our point of view, and our point of view is what I call man space. But interestingly enough, in our man space, we now see that we have different dimensions within our man space. And so the fundamental 3 dimensions are the soul dimension, the emotional dimension, and the physical dimension. But our man space is exclusively from our point of view. And so when we're discussing science, we have to be very specific. Whose point of view are we discussing it from? So we have the option to discuss it from the man space point of view, which is only right, because that's why you're spending your valuable time trying to learn about the knowledge of the Keshe Foundation. And so we see that there is an element within our man space that has been kind of ignored. And so that has to do with the soul. And then we find that when we're talking about the soul, it's kind of like a car. It's not very specific. It doesn't tell you the color, doesn't tell you the flavor, doesn't tell you the model, and doesn't tell you how strong it is. But what we see is that our man space constitutes of these 3 plasma amigos, the soul of the man, the soul of the body, and the soul of the cells. And collectively together, they can manifest into the physical environment. But what physical environment? And so we see that it has to be this earth space, right? We've come here, and we know that because we are here. So, there are other things that we don't know, such as how we got here and where we're going, and can we do this differently, or do we just have to understand how this is working? Because you see, in terms of Earth space, sure, we understand our biosphere range because that's where we live. We breathe air, we drink water, we eat food, and we also make a mess of things. But we find that the Earth space is broader than that, takes other things into account. And in fact, it has a field strength that goes all the way up to the moon. And so the moon is part of the Earth space also. But then we know that the moon has its own space. So we see that the moon space is part of this Earth space. And so the way the Earth is actually working is it has this range, and it has this life range that's within the magnetical peace dome. And that represents the soul of the Earth body. And then we have the core, which is the soul of the Earth. And then there's a question of how do we differentiate all of this stuff, right? Because there's so much variety. So there has to be some kind of dictation that dictates the sequence. And that sequence product is the gravitational stability. So we see that we have the hemispheric rotations in the north and south hemisphere, and they rotate in opposite directions and are very stable. But we see that the Earth space itself, in terms of physicality, only rotates in one direction. So we see that these two rotating fields come together, converge into a physical rotating field. And this is our point of stability. Gravitational stability is paramount. And so as we're doing these preparations for the flight tests to the moon, this is our nearest neighbor. And we know so very little about it. In fact, anything that we know seems to be only half. And so we race to the moon. Yes, we are. And it's interesting because today Jupiter has smashed a record for the number of moons in our solar system. It's added 12 more moons and it's climbed into first place. So the race is really gathering steam here. Jupiter already has 92 moons. So all of you who have gone through school many moons ago probably were unaware that there are that many moons around Jupiter. And I know that Saturn, for me anyway, I didn't know that they were in second place. And it's too bad because they used to be in first place, but now they only have 83 moons. But then now I find Uranus has 27 and Neptune has 14. Even Mars has 2 moons and we only have 1. And we've only seen half of that. So, you know, it's too bad for Venus and Mercury because, well, they don't have any. So to understand how all of this is coming together, we have to understand the plasma science. And in order to understand that, we have to define it. So when new people ask you, what is plasma? Tell them it's a kind of energy state. And there are different kinds of energy states. And so these energy states, depending on your point of view, affect you, obviously, but it affects our Earth space. This is our living space. And it also affects our inner space. You see, because our inner space follows a sequence of events that allows us to live on this Earth space. And if we can understand this sequence, it may give us the key to the gateway to outer space. And I think this is very important because we're all here. And it'd be nice, you know, before we leave to know more about this. In fact, it's probably the most important thing that we need to know. And it's disappointing how little we do know. And so if important is not important, then, you know, let's face it, nothing is important. And so we need to relax. And the relaxation affects our emotions. And as we look at our plasma fields, we find that our emotions are plasma fields because they're not tangible, right? But yet we feel them. So we find that we have emotion of the man. Well, that's us. But this emotion is also a physical emotion, right? Because you're not going to do anything unless you want to, even though you may or may not be physically capable. But, you know, your presence here is a direct emotion. And where your presence is, we found out last week, was the emotion of position. So the position changes. And it changes with the exchange of energy. It also changes with the sequence of the exchange of energy. And so to facilitate the sequence, we have these basic plasma rules. And contrary to our social order here, we see that the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. And so each of these energy states has a difference in strength, in field strength. And these energy states can increase or decrease by at least an order of magnitude. And so if they increase, we call that natural creation. But if they decrease, unfortunately, we call that natural decay. But it's another form of creation. And then another form of energy transfer is a catalytic or non-consuming energy transfer. And so we're going to talk about that a lot more today, because energy has to be transferred. And depending on the state, it can transfer higher or lower. And if it's transferring higher, the higher transfer rate is higher by many orders of magnitude as well. So it's a double bonus, or it's a double jeopardy, however you want to look at it. And so you can make your decision. And this affects is how you absorb these plasma fields. But maybe there's a limiting factor, and that would be a barrier of these plasma fields. And is there an overriding factor? And yes, there is. Plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. And so we can clearly see that our social structure doesn't really understand that, because we see that the field strength manifests from rotation. And so the speed of the rotation affects this field strength. So with the massive selection of moons that we have now, we can discuss moon rotation, because can we say that a moon is identified by its rotation? Well, no, we can't. No, because some are prograde. That means they rotate in the same direction as the planet, and some are retrograde. They rotate in the opposite direction of the planet. And we understand that the relation of the moon is to the planet, right? And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about rotation direction, as a relation to its planet. And then some wobble but don't rotate. And so our lonely moon is a wobbler. So the speed of rotation can't apply in some circumstances with the speed of relation. And so we have to look at these relationships and see that these relationships change by field strength. And it isn't just one step at a time, but it can transcend multiple energy states. And so for our immediate purpose, we say, okay, well, Earth space is a kind of energy state, and ours, man space, is participating with that energy state. So there's a relationship between man space and Earth space. But there's another relationship, as we've said, and that is the ethos of the universe. So we have to take that into account. So what that means exactly is that we have two feeding dimensions. So this would be Earth space and man space, and we have a third feedback dimension. And so that is the physical manifestation of all that we see. And seeing as we're the ones seeing it, then we're none of those three dimensions. We're in another dimension. Isn't that interesting? And so we find that the reality dimension is outer space. But outer space is not a place. Outer space is a method of energy transfer. And energy transfer is actually energy in motion. And so the universe was created from this energy. It exists from energy. But this energy is always in motion. And to know in which direction this motion is going, it has to have a charge. And if it's going somewhere, it has to have something to combine with. So all things in combination. Well, when we look at the universal order of creation of matters as the Magrav condition on the cover of book number 1, this is a combination of 3 energy states into one Magrav. Well, that one Magrav then is a combination of itself. But how can it exist? How can it maintain its position? Because the energy is always in motion. So therefore, this is only one point of reference. There has to be another point of reference. And does that point of reference have to be in the same energy state? Or can we go into other energy states? And so we see from our man space, that we have emotion and we have physicality. And those are in 2 different energy states. So yes, we can transcend energy states. And so then the question becomes is, what are the mechanics, if you will, that allow us to come together? So we see that when 2 forces come together, they form a third. And so we see that this comes from the universe. And so we are in the business of harvesting energy from the universe. And this becomes very important because in order for us to have this existence, we have to enhance ourselves. And we know that because at one point in time we were babies and now we're adults. No comment on the maturity, just on the physiology. Because we find that there are a lot of adults who like to enhance themselves at the expense of others. But this becomes baggage. And so in effect, this becomes a self-consuming process. And the way they take the energy from others also has different kinds of ramifications. The worst of which is the loosh harvesting, which is the actual sucking of energy. And so when we see that the universe is providing energy, it is using PM ticks as the feeding mechanism, if you will. And so the feeding of the PM ticks is a magnetical field force that is coming together, and it has to go somewhere. And so we've seen from the Magrav condition that it's a combination of the principal matter, the transition matter, and the convergence matter. And so all of this converts into a Magrav condition. So if the PM ticks are magnetical feeding, then the Magrav is a gravitational component. And that gravitational component gives you one manifestation. And so that manifestation has to have a place. And in order to have a place, it has to have a feedback from that place. And so that feedback manifests into another field interaction, which we call inertia. And so there's a feeding, there's a feedback. So now we can see that there's a 2-way street. And we know that because we see the sun and we see the earth. So if we can see it, surely if the sun had eyes, it could see the earth. And if the earth had eyes, it could see the sun, because we see the 2 in the same field. But notwithstanding the physicality, the universal energy that is transferred unconditionally. And this goes down the path of the street we call equality. Because the sun does not dictate who on earth gets that energy or what on earth gets that energy, right? So whatever gets that energy is the priority. The receiver dictates the receipt of the energy. So when these two forces come together, too many of us see it as a flash or a glow, or we go for the glitter. And the most important thing in our society is it profitable? And then, of course, we have some people who working very, very hard to lose, and they're confident that they will lose. But if that confidence manifests into losing, doesn't that mean that's a lack of confidence in creation? And so this lack of confidence in creation, well, how can you do that? Because it's bountiful. And so we account for or discount for a lot of things. And so we have these other extremes where it could be a blast or it could be a genetic defect. And so, we really wonder sometimes, what are we doing exactly? And so when we look at the core components of the energy that comes from the universe, we see that it's a Magravh condition. And that Magravh condition repeats itself in an atom. So if the electron is magnetical and the electron is part of the atom, then the atom must be gravitational. But isn't it interesting that an atom is not really physical, it's a ray, and the electron is a PM tick. And so the dilemma that we have is that the core component of this energy is whether or not it's plasmatic or physical. So when we look at the fundamental principle of the twinities, we see that there is a marriage between the electron and the proton, but there's a radical size difference. The large twin plasma of the proton feeds the smaller plasma of the electron. But the two together form an atom, which is elementary. It's the elemental component of matter. And so when we look at the periodic table of elements, that's what we have to realize. It's elementary. It's basic. You, technically speaking, can't get more basic. And that's why it's called an atom, because you can't cut it. That's what atomic means, uncut. But obviously, we can cut it into electrons and protons and neutrons, and wow. And so we see that it's a two-way street. But when we look at this periodic table of elements, we see an organization. And so we'll talk about that even more, because it affects a sequence of things. So when you look at that periodic table, it is organized. Very organized, very predictable. And so to move anywhere on that table, you can turn on or turn off the feeding process. And that affects the strength. So obviously, you can also increase or decrease the strength. And obviously, that's going to change the positioning. So through the process of feeding or increasing the strength, we can either enhance or diminish the positioning. Well, how can we do that if the higher energy feeds the lower energy? So how does the lower energy feed it? So we see that there's another form. And so this is the ray. This is the difference between the neutron and the atom. Because the breakdown of the neutron, which is the initial fundamental plasma, breaks down to the electron-proton combination. And in that process, there's a release of the PM ticks. And so the PM ticks have kind of an electron characteristic without the proton. And so again, that unfortunate word, the nuclear decay of the neutron, but it's not, it's just another launch dimension. And so if we're launching something, we have to land somewhere. So we have to have reference points between a launch field and the landing field. And so what we have to decide is how to emit these rays and how to absorb these rays. And we have to maintain these rays. And this is all done at light speed. And as we found out, there are many different speeds. So what we do know is that there is a bonding dimension, and it bonds between the plasmatic spectrum and the physicality spectrum. So when we look at the periodic table of elements, we are only looking at the physicality spectrum in mathematical terms. And so we can't see much, but what we can see is that there's a lot of organization. And so let's discuss that even more, because somehow these are all coming together. And so if the periodic table of elements is elementary, then what is a molecule? And so we see that a molecule is a group of two or more atoms held together by chemical bonds. Okay. But there's another group called compounds. And compounds are a substance formed by two or more different types of elements. They're united chemically in a fixed proportion. So the rule is that all molecules are not compounds, but all compounds are molecules. So we see that water is a compound. One minute. So to make it a compound, it means it's made up of water molecules. There are no such things as water atoms. And there are no such things as air atoms also. So water molecules are made up of hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and those two are on the periodic table of elements. But there's a proportion, and that proportion ends up being two hydrogens for one oxygen. And in the relationship of physical matter.
Alex, I think your mic is closed unless you're adjusting something in the background. I don't know if you had a disturbance or.
Thank you. I guess I better backtrack. I didn't realize that happened.
It's happened to all of us, yes.
So I believe I left off that water is a compound, and it's made up of water molecules. So there's no such thing as water atoms, and there's no such things as air atoms either. So water molecules are made up of hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and there's a definite proportion where we have two hydrogens and one oxygen in a relationship, but that is in the physical matter state. So how do we determine which element are we talking about? How do we determine which molecule or which compound? So there has to be a sequence organized to put all that together. And it doesn't come, then it could be out of sequence. Or it could be something that's undesirable to us. And how do you tell the difference if it's in sequence or it's out of sequence? So heaven forbid that you scratch your nose and in that point of damage, you grow more toes. And if you couldn't tell the difference, maybe you could smell the difference. But, too late, you've done the damage already. Well, fortunately for us, there are sequence providers that can undo the damage, and that's called healing. So it's a good thing that, that is taken care of on our behalf. Because, see, that becomes the manifestation point. If you scratch your nose, that nose is going to heal into nose things. So this is the plasmatic symbiosis, where you have two fields come together and they create another. But it's not simple math, where 1 and 1 is 2, because you still have the one. And you have the other one. And then you have the product of the two. So all of that keeps going. And so we have different rays that are contributing energy. And so we're on the path now to add things like X-rays and gamma rays and even cosmic rays, because really what we're looking for is this gateway to outer space. But we're having difficulty in understanding this matter plasma dimension. And so what's important is we need to differentiate between the physical state and the plasmatic state. Because the physical state is the weakest state, is the lowest energy state. And so when we're looking at what kind of modification we're talking about, we have to also figure out which is the dominant matter state that we are related to. Our planets have done this. They have maintained this positioning. And the moons around these planets have also done the same thing. They've maintained the positioning. And so it's well organized, isn't it? Because each one has their own orbit. And each one has their own position around the sun. And the moons go around the planets. And in fact, there are other things that go around these planets called rings. And then there are things between the rings. So in other words, the rings themselves have boundaries to differentiate from other rings. So we have rings and things and moons and planets and even suns. And they all are working on some kind of positioning, which last week we've identified as the motion of position. So when we're looking at speed, and speed is very important because we want to know how fast things are going, right? Because it affects our time. And so in order to understand time, we understand that there's a relationship between distance and speed. If you reduce the time, but you don't change the distance, then to keep this equation balanced, you have to increase the speed. And the speed that we're talking about is light years, because that's how we measure the distance between the planets. And so if we can reduce that distance as a relationship with time, then we must increase the speed. So the relationship of the distance to time would fail in terms of that reference. The distance to speed is a better reference. And so time becomes irrelevant. So time is only a factor in the physical energy state. time is a factor in some plasma states, but time is virtually instantaneous in other plasma states. And so this is where our knowledge limitation comes in, because we're limited by our understanding of nuclear science. And nuclear science seems to ignore the ethos of the universe, which involves morality, compassion, and courage. And not only, but we say that because that all together manifests creation, and creation is the giving of life. So if you're not giving of life, you are not following the ethos of the universe. And we see that life on our Earth space and life within our man space operates by the same rules. Those are the universal rules. But our social rules seem to like to bind this energy by crossing and double crossing others. Why make it when you can steal it? And so the net result, the product, is that manifestation point. And that is the only reference that too many of us make. And so we have this energy state on this planet. Well, can we change this energy state? Well, of course we can. We just have to make the connections. We have to understand that there are dimensions, and each of those dimensions follow the same rules as our three amigos. And there's an adaptation to these different dimensions. And that adaptation is based on emotions. Okay, so we know that our presence on this planet is part of the emotion of presence that has manifested our physicality. And so we find that this physicality is a manifestation. So anytime the two fields come together, they can be a manifestation, but they can be non-tangible or tangible, or non-visible or visible. And so this plasma feeding is what leads to this manifestation. And so this manifestation could be a plasmatic reality or a physical reality. But in all cases, it would be a plasmatic reality. And so it's the plasmatic reality that is determined, that determines the launch field and determines the target field and determines the field in between, the connecting field or the link. And so the emotion of presence is this form artifact of energy in motion, because that is the presence at any manifestation point. So when we look at ourselves and we see that this manifestation point comes from within, this is a feeding radiance that comes from within our inner space, but it goes back into our inner space. And is it the same? So it's clearly not the same, because we also have the capability of having a physical manifestation. And if the physical manifestation is at a lower energy state, then maybe the feeding radiance has lost some energy. But if it loses some energy, how much energy does it lose? And if the physical manifestation has lost this energy, can it lose too much? So there has to be some kind of balance. There has to be a feedback radiance to balance that out, isn't it? Because our inner space point is within an inner space field. And that inner space field is not only a maggrav, but is gravitationally stable. So in discussing the energy, and if you remember in the earlier classes, scientist named Herman Weyl said that there's no such thing as one and the same energy. And we know that energy constitutes a charge. So there's no such thing as one and the same energy at two adjacent increments of time, because that energy has to move. It can't be at the same place at the same time. So there's a flow and there's a connection. where does the gravitational stability come from? Because if that energy moves and another energy comes, is that energy going to be the same energy? Well, no, there's no such thing as one and the same energy. That same energy cannot be at the two different places at the same time. So what determines? So something is determining our structure, and the fundamental structure is the amino acids of the environment. And so we see a compound. Amino acids are a compound of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. And we see that the elements are consisting of neutrons and protons, and of course electrons. And when they come together, there's a sequence. Because did we say which amino acid? There are 20 different amino acids involved in the metabolic process of all living things. So not only is there a sequence, but there's something that differentiates between them. And so when we look at the basic structure of the amino acids, we find that there is a foundation. And then there's this element called R, which is a variable. And we can talk about that in another session. It's just that you know that there is a sequence. And so this has to do with the metabolic process. And the metabolic process is the casting out. Meta is out and bol is to cast, is the casting out. Are we casting out of our mind? Or are we already out of our minds? Or are we playing words here, you know, where we have to know our place based on class or caste? And maybe we say, well, class is based on a social ranking. Another play on words is maybe we're striving for a classless society. And maybe we're already classless. As I said, you can't insult the ignorant. So we see that the organs in our body, they come from somewhere. And we see that there's a plasmatic manifestation that is connected to the brain and the heart. And there's a physical manifestation connected to the liver and the reproductive system and all the cells in our body. But there's a sequence. And so when we look at the basic amino acids, we see that there is a fundamental difference. And so some have combination, but not with sugar. And some have a combination with sugar. So this is the point. Either sugar is present or sugar is absent in the creation of these amino acids. And so that sequencing, as we discussed in a previous class, is based on the Krebs cycle. And so we see, interestingly enough, there's 3 levels in the Krebs cycle called cytochrome A, B, and C. And in each cycle, in each energy state, we produce 12 ATP. ATP standing for adenosine triphosphate. And so we can see that this has to do with our transition, transmission, and transmutation. And if we are failing to produce enough ATP in each of these energy levels, then we start to create an unhealthy cell condition. And so we need more sugar to restore that. So that's the basic sequence. But the thing is, it manifests itself in our DNA because our DNA are created from the amino acids. And they come in sets of 3. Isn't that interesting? And there are 64 triple base codons of the DNA. And then, of course, there's the RNA. And it has the same type of triple base codons. The only difference is one of these amino acids as part of this codon structure to differentiate between RNA and DNA. But apparently the Chinese knew this many centuries ago, because here's the I Ching, which has 64 triple pairs of codons. And I thought, the modern man is the smart one and the ancient one. Well, what about the Atlanteans? They're even more ancient. And so we see that it seems that they knew about the DNA even before us. So we're supposedly the smart Westerners. We're just getting to understand adaptation. So there's an inner space spectrum feeding, and it can cause an RNA modification because it incorporates the universal energies. But there's an inner space feedback radiance, which causes an adaptation of the DNA because it's adapting to Earth space energies. Long story short, potentiation of hydrogen, known as pH. In an alkaline state, the DNA spiral shrinks. In a healthy state, the DNA spiral is at a certain size. In an acidic state, the DNA spiral starts to expand and flatten out. This affects communication. And so we find that in a healthy state, the communication is perfect. In an acidic state, the communication begins to be compromised. And so we have another sequence provider, which we called hormones, and we discussed that also in a previous class. And the purpose of the hormones is to enhance or diminish. Remember that? It enhances or diminishes field strength. But there are also sequence disruptors. And so we have a moderator, adrenaline or cortisone, which allows us to adapt. And then, of course, there's an mRNA feedback, which allows the DNA to adapt. So these are all important. And so we see that, when we look at the 4 Ps, the pharmacology, which affects psychiatry, we have to understand that it's the physiology that's affected by the psychology. There's a sequence. One hormone begets another. And each hormone grows into a sequence, and that sequence becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes the communication sequence. And so all of this follows energy paths, which we've described as the central nervous system or the electron transport system or the interstitial network within the body. This is all the hormonal network within the body. And it's regulated by our emotion, because there are about 64 named hormones, and some are considered steroids and some are considered hormones. But the mother of all hormones, DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone. And then we have dopamine and adrenaline and cortisol, which I've mentioned. But then the two most important ones with respect to man's space is estrogen and testosterone. And so these all become mitigators, or shall we say either enhancers, where we're talking about the fight or flight system in our bodies, or the rest or digest system within our bodies. But then there are suppressors to suppress the pain, like cortisol and dopamine. And then there are other mitigators that control what is allowable and what is unallowable. And does that include morality? If the universal law is to create life, if you are not contributing to life, then that becomes unallowable. So there's a disconnection somewhere. And so we find that when we're looking at this DHEA, it's the mother of all hormones, but as we get older, we produce less of it. And isn't it interesting that, you know, as a baby, we depend on mother's milk, and mother's milk is high in water-soluble calcium. And so as we age, we're producing less DHEA. So is it less, or is it less of excess? Because the universe only provides what you need, no more or less. And so we see that we start off with a position of our soul, and that soul evolves into an adult body. And so there are cell souls that facilitate this transcription of coding from the RNA and DNA. And we have these undifferentiated cells which become differentiated through this emotion of positioning. And if we don't get that right, then sometimes these differentiated cells become unhealthy cells because they can't stop producing when they're supposed to. So there's the communication breakdown. But the whole point is that we are very gravitationally stable, and our Earth is gravitationally stable. And the reason for that is because we not only have a soul, but we have a soul of the body, and that body is on the Earth. And so we see that the Earth rotates but doesn't walk, but we can walk and we don't have to rotate. And as we've seen in the past couple of months, we still haven't found any proof of outer space, because everywhere we look, it's some kind of space. It's either sun space or moon space or planet space or that space in between. You know, where is this? And so we're trying to organize this relationship between the scientific responsibility and the spiritual responsibility. And as plasma scientists, we're trying to add to the knowledge. And the reason for that is because we're trying to affect the rate of change. Well, how do we affect the rate of change without disrupting the sequence? And so where's this point? And we find that it's an emotion point, because this emotion point is the difference between the universal energy and the transcendence into the physical energy state. So it takes us from the plasmatic reality to the physical reality. What is this connection? What is this? How do we confirm this connection? What is that point? What is that connecting point? Because we understand the plasma feeding rule. Well, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. But, you know, clearly there's a crossover point in between. So something is providing all this energy transfer. So there are basic plasmatic field strength rules. There's magnetical principles of attraction and repulsion. We call it magnetical or gravitational. But there's also a feeding. What are we feeding? Is it food? Is it water? Is it air? Or is it energy? And then how much do we feed? In what sequence do we do the feeding? And how do we know that without feedback? And so we find it's a two-way street where energy is always in motion. And so this energy is a feeding pack. That's what it is. And so what form does it come into? And so whatever it comes into is how it transcends these different energy levels. So that's the reality dimension. That's the transcending reality dimension. And as such, it always has a charge. And so if we look at one field, and we see that there's a magnetical gravitational charge, well, one leads to the other. And so if the gravitational is stronger than the magnetical, then there's no way for the magnetical to feed back to the gravitational if the magnetical is weaker. But if we were to change energy levels, then in that regard, the magnetical would be stronger. So therefore, the relationship isn't just you yourself, it has to take other things into account. So the only thing that you can do is you can emit magnetically and you can absorb gravitationally, just like the rest of the universe does. And so this is what happens when we see the GANs in the bottle. We see that the bottle is physical, but it's transparent. And we see the GANs inside, but we also see the water and it's transparent. Oh, by the way, did you notice the air? It's also transparent. And by the way, there's another hole in the GANs there, and that's also transparent. So, you can't see it, but, it's there. It's obviously there because there are different field strengths there. And they're all within our biosphere. So something has caused a difference in energy strength here, and that has to do with the emotional affinity of all of these, because all of these are a feedback of a feeding byproduct. In other words, they're all part of a process of a process. And so now maybe we understand the cups of life better, because first of all, they're not the cups of the pandemic, they're the cups of this inner space where we derive our emotional strength. And so when we look at the periodic table of elements, that we find, well, there's these transition metals. And there's iron, there's copper, there's zinc, and a whole slew of others. And they're in between here and in between there. So where is the there? So what we've decided to do, and we did this in the previous class, is we moved two of the columns from the left side over to the right side. Let's take a close-up. Let's zoom in and look at what's going on here. And so we see the basic amino acids, right? The structure of the amino acids being the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. And then we see the medium, the element of the environment, the sodium, magnesium, potassium, or calcium. And then, of course, we see our physicality, the iron, the copper, and the zinc. And then we have this funny phenomena where we have hydrogen and it doesn't know which side it's on. And then we have this stuff in between, what we call an inert gas. These are called noble gases or inert gases. We're talking about helium, neon, argon, krypton. And it comes from the fact that these elements, they're elementary, remember, elementary, so they're unreactive towards other elements or compounds. If they're unreactive, well, then they can't be compounds. But can they be molecules? So, to be chemically inert is to describe a substance that's not chemically reactive. And from a thermodynamic perspective, if it is thermodynamically unstable, but decomposes at a slow or negligible rate, so you could say that it's inert, but really when you say that it's inert, it means that it's not active, it's not interacting, it's not giving and taking, it's not magnetical or gravitational. Well, we now know if it's not magnetical or gravitational, hello, it doesn't exist. So it does exist. And so when we look at the cup of life and we see the ganses, and we've created the ganses, the CO2 and the calcium and the copper, the zinc gans, and these are all molecules. They're also compounds. They're not elementary. And then when we look at the amino acid, they're not elementary either. And we already know that water is not elementary, but they say water is inert. Well, if it was inert, how did you produce all these ganses? And where did these ganses all come from? And then you see, well, there's a cup of soul as well. And each of these cups, the cup of soul, the cup of emotion, the cup of physicality, each of them has a magnetical gravitational relationship and a soul. But collectively, all three of them come together with a magnetical gravitational field strength and a soul. But that's on its own. We have to have a point of reference. And that cup of inertia is the field strength between these two reference points. And so we're starting to see a pattern that we have two reference points and one field strength, and another reference point and another field strength. And then we have a product called GANS that comes from that, which is none of those three. So you have three dimensions that you've put forward, but you get none of those three. You get another dimension. And so what you've done is you've changed the field strength, but by what basis? So there has to be a relationship. And so that's the fifth cup, the cup of the earth. And you've done the same thing. You have this relationship. And so we put it all together. So we have the man space represented by the cup of the soul, cup of emotion, cup of physicality, interacting with the earth space represented by the cup of the earth. And those two fields are interacting and producing the cup of inertia. And we've got 5 cups here. And I thought 1 and 1 was more than 2, but how much more? So to maintain this Magravs condition, we know that we have these binding energy paths where energy is coming in and we absorb this energy. And then to maintain this energy, we have to have more come in. And so this is all done, what we call attraction, and is done gravitationally. But, in order to maintain that, we also have to emit. And so we emit more, and we keep emitting more through repulsion. This becomes the magnetical effect. And so these are both going together. So we see this Magravs feeding dimension because we have a Magravs, we have an earth space, we have a man space. So the energy is coming in and the energy is going out. And so this is going on constantly. Well, if that's the case, and then we also have these other rays, and if that's the case, then we find that these inert gases aren't really so inert, are they? So when we talk about a misfortune in terms of description, like natural decay, inert gases are an unfortunate description. They're not inert. They're gravitationally stable. They're stable as elements. And we know that elements are physical molecules. Well, how can elements be molecules? And that is, like, if you have a copper wire, it's made from copper atoms. So you have the elements coming together, one element and another element of the same becomes a molecule. So each of these gases are also physical molecules of the basic elements, the basic atomic elements of whatever they are, whether they're helium, neon, or argon, or krypton. And then we can create products from these elements, but not with the inert gases. We can do this with the other chemical molecules and create products. But we also know that we can create plasma molecules. We call them GANs. So we also know that there are plasmagen molecules, which are plasma gas molecules. So it looks like these inert gases are actually sequence providers for the transmutation, because there's a two-way street, isn't there? There's a dynamic plasma relationship. There's an inner space and inner space field, and there's a horizontal transmission. There's also vertical transmission. There's also a transmutational transmission. And we know this because we see with this dynamic plasma relationship of the sun and its sun space field, because it transmits to other fields and it doesn't discriminate. It's a universal feeding, right? And anything within that field, it feeds it. But not only, but for the purposes of today's discussion, that's just fine. And so this feeding then is dependent on the earth, isn't it? Because the earth is doing this environmental modification, because there's an emotional relationship. And we also are part of this earth space. So the inner space of the earth space affects the physical space, and the inner space of man's space affects the physical man. And all of this affects some other space. So we have to see how these are interacting. And so fundamentally, our space is a transmutation to some other space, and this is all done through emotional positioning. And so we've arrived at that conclusion, and understand to go from one space to another space, it has to transcend through this reality dimension, where you have the two-way street of the feeding radiance and the feedback radiance coming together without collisions, without accidents, without disasters, well organized. And in fact, as we're searching for outer space, we now have to realize that the specific characteristic that we have, which is physicality, comes from the transparency point to that manifestation point plasmatically. And then if it goes one more level, that's materialization. So therefore, because it's a two-way street to go back, that would be dematerialization. And so materialization becomes a specific characteristic of physicality. So when we're talking about plasma science, we're talking about a specific characteristic of manifestation. And that's how our soul operates. That's the essential you. That's the interaction between these plasma-gen states and these matter-gen states. So where does that leave the soul of the body? The soul of the body, that's the surrogate you, isn't it? That's the interaction between that plasma-gen state and the environment. You have to take that into account because, you know, you have to be somewhere. Everybody is somewhere. I don't know where that is, but it doesn't matter. That's not my business. That's your business. And so there's a stability that goes along with that. And so to maintain that stability, we have to have an emotional stability. So that emotional stability, it comes from our relationship with respect to our soul, the body, and our physical body with respect to the earth body. And in order to maintain this stability, we have this left side, right side balance in all three aspects: mental, emotional, and physical. How cool is that? So the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side controls the left side of the body, and there's this crossover. And so we now have not only the emotion of presence, hello, we're here, but within us, we have different organs. They all have a position. So they follow the rules of the emotion of position. And it's a good thing because I don't have the skill. You can't tear the whole body apart and try and put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't work that way because that's the difference between physical reality and plasma reality. So the plasma reality manifests into the emotion of presence from the emotion of position. And so that's the sequence. And so when we see the marriage body between mommy and daddy, it's the same thing. We don't see the reflection. We have to see the emission, right? So the blue genes, they're not blue. They're every other color except blue. And so they are what they emit. And so we see that the gene modification that we're talking about is an adaptation. And is it enduring or is it reversible? And we have this confusion because we don't know any better. We're only seeing things from the physical point. And coming from the physical point is not the sequence. It's the result of the sequence. It is not even the sequence modifier. It is not the sequence provider. So when we look at the testosterone, sure, that's, you know, that's the male. And we look at the estrogen, and that's the female. But the female also has testosterone, and the male also has estrogen. So what we're looking at is the difference between a competition or cooperation. You have to take that into context. And then that creates a field, that creates a marriage. And then from there, it goes into an environment. And so that environment could be a family. And one of the problems with the family is the familiarity. Sometimes that breeds contempt. And you find that families will break up. And so the God-given family that you have may be replaced by a gang family or even a global family. But in reality, we're all part of the Earth family. And so having contempt for all of us on this earth family is the wrong way to look at it. It affects our emotional position because it creates a point of conflict. And so this becomes a tug of war between the physical and emotional positioning. And really all it boils down to is a man-made law versus the universal law, where the man-made law tells the universe to shut up. And if that's the field that you want to play on, that's fine. But we have to elevate to a higher position, to a higher energy state, to a point where this universal law dominates. How high do we go? So we see that, the earth has got a good act going. The earth has a peace dome. It has a soul of the earth body that's represented by the peace dome, which encircles the earth. And then we have this biosphere where we're quite happy to live on, and includes the atmosphere. They say air is inert, water is inert. Really? Well, somehow we have created land and vertical people and horizontal people. Doesn't sound very inert to me. So somebody's got something wrong, because that's not the factor. The soul of the earth is the factor, because that's at the core of the discussion. Because within our discussion, the soul of the cells is at the core of that discussion. And so there's a similarity between the cell structure and the earth structure, because in both cases, they provide gravitational stability. That's what this is important. So the goal of having gravitational stability is part of the creation process. And so that anomaly has been resolved. But there's another anomaly is what is the source of your inspiration? Because we have leaders and we have followers, and which one are you? And how does this work with the universal community? Well, guess what? They have the same questions. And the earth, has already asked these questions, because the earth is here. The earth has the dynamic peace dome that's representative of the soul of the earth body. And that's as a direct result of the sequence provided by the soul of the core of the earth. And so we become guests, if you will. And that's a good thing, because, without the earth, we wouldn't be here. So neither would the vertical people, and they seem to understand this very well. They position themselves and they've done this peacefully. Well, why can't we do that peacefully? So, obviously there's a call of freedom and emancipation, and that has to do with the normal emotional construct of the universe. The earth follows that. And so man's existential adaptation has to default to the harvest of this plasma emotional energy of the plasma universe. So this is where our failure comes in, because in our pursuit of happiness, we don't understand the emotional position and the failure thereof. So the emotional position has a sequence, and you find that sequence never came through a rocket launch, but we came here because we preferred the bountifulness of Earth space as opposed to Mars space, right? And so we have this emotional position map, which we can follow. And it's a universal map, and it's a map of the energy and motion and the transcendence of energy from one dimension through another dimension through the reality dimension. And this all has to do with the feeding radiance and the feedback radiance. And so feeding becomes a very important word. So let's change up a few things here. So when we talk about the soul sequencing, we have the soul of the sun and we have the soul of the earth. So that attracts the soul of the man, I guess. But there's a priority, isn't there? There's a soul sequencing priority. You have to have a soul of the earth first. So the soul of the solar system plus the soul of the sun attracts the soul of the earth. Okay, good. Now we can interact with the soul of the earth. But still not, because it's the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth that attracts the soul of the earth body. Now we have something to be attracted to. So it's the soul of the earth body plus the soul of the man that attracts the soul of the body. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Well, where is that place? So we find that the soul of the sun body plus the soul of the earth body manifests the physicality of the earth. Now we have a place to go to. Now we see that the soul of the earth plus the soul of the body manifests the physicality of our body. Because now we have gravitational stability. And when you understand that, well, now we can go to Mars if we want to. But we didn't go to Mars in the first place. We were born on Earth because we had a preference emotionally and a sentimental emotion that drew us to Earth space. And we were born using an outer space system. And so we were attracted here not only through the inner space of the Earth space, but through the inner space of the man space. And so this became our target, the physicality of the Earth space. And we're enjoying its presence here, except that it's not a very peaceful place because we are peaceful. That's our position. We need to cross this peace bridge by setting up that kind of emotion. If we position our emotion of peace, then we can cross this inner space of peace. And that's where science meets the soul of man for peace. And so each of these atoms coming together, forming molecules and compounds. And we're in the December 16th, 2022 post era. That was the watershed, where we have choices in how we can transmute through space to find that bountiful space, but do it gracefully. And speaking of feeding, on February the 19th, guess who's coming for dinner? Be there. What else you doing? This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, teachings on plasma science, calling all Earth space patriots. There is a World Peace Treaty. Sign it, be part of it, with your soul, with your heart, and commit to it, because space has overlapping fields of life, and these are all free from the boundaries and from abuse. You have the emotional position map of the universal community. But guess what? The universal community has the same map now. And so the earthbound physical and emotional gravitational transformation is what we have to go through to enhance our stability. And so this sequence where we have this transmutation connection to this transparency point and the manifestation point, this all starts with adaptation and awareness. We have an emotional inner space construct, and this connects equally to the universal broadcast of the inner space of freedom. And the universe is broadcasting this universally. So turn on, tune in, and see how the soul of the body sequencing can adapt with man's morality, this is a game changer. Plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the outer space age. That's the end of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed the trip, folks. Back to you, Mark. Thank you.
Wow, you've touched on so many points, Alex. Are we going to have to know every detail here, backward and forward, to be able to move around the universe? Is there some things that just happen automatically? Not that I want you to answer right now. I'd rather have others. But it's just a tremendous amount of knowledge. And I've always said that. I've always realized it, but I don't even think I realize how deep and endless this and how vast this knowledge is. But I'd like to open it up. Thank you very much for your continued sharing. Are we going to get a wellness center here too because of all your teaching? Or do we connect to Linz?
So that's a really good question. And obviously, what happened last year and what's happening this year are different. And why that is significant is because a lot of people are still, tied into that watershed moment 2023 years ago. And as we've seen with the inert gases, they're not inert. They're just a watershed point. So we're moving the watershed point to another watershed point, February the 19th, 2023. So look forward.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If we're going to take this knowledge across the universe and teach it, and I know he said the messenger, the message, and the creator will become one to deliver this knowledge across the universe. So perhaps I don't see how my memory can possibly, of course, the soul does carry the totality, but I don't see how my physical structure could possibly do this without the help of the creator.
Well, I hate to say this, Mark, but you're just one flippin' neutron.
Okay. Wow. Well, let's open it up. Let's see who has a thought, a comment, a suggestion. Maybe you could take it a little easier on us, Alex. Let's go to the attendees.
Hello, Mark.
Yes,
Hello,
Claudia.
Alex.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to see your class, Alex. Thank you very much. And I was talking with a knowledge seeker yesterday, and I was a little bit confused about the emotion. What's this kind of meeting that Mr. Cash is doing? We change a little bit our emotions, but what's exactly like in the physics is more velocity and is motion's more motion, is more near from our soul of the man. What's exactly this change? We can come back to the 0 point. I don't know how to explain. Because we have our emotion when you born and you grow up and see many things and our behavior changed. But with this technology, what happened exactly? If you could say about it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find one of the slides there too. This is a terrific question, and each of us has to, really come up with an answer on this thing, because the success or failure on understanding the direction of flow is affecting all of us. Okay, I think I think I know where this is right now. Just let me, I brought it up many times before. And so last week we changed this, and we call this the vanishing emotion point. And the reason for it is because the emotion point is specifically located in between our soul and our physicality. But not just the physical reality, there is a plasmatic reality. So the emotion is also in between the soul and the plasmatic reality. Therefore, the plasmatic reality and or the physical reality are both byproducts of the emotion. And when we say the emotion, which emotion is that? So we have an emotional attachment to our physical reality. And how do you know that? And because you were born. And so that emotional reality is connected to your physical reality. Now, what about the plasma reality? There's another emotion that manifested that. And that emotion is connected to the plasmatic reality. And then you have the soul, which was created from an emotion. But that soul creates another emotion. And what does that emotion connect to? So in the first case, it has to connect to the plasmatic reality, because the plasmatic reality is fundamental. And so we find that in our plasmatic reality, which we have described as non-tangible, non-visible, things to do with the soul, soul of the man, soul of the body, soul of the self, the three amigos. These are all your friends. These are your friends. And so we have a problem on this planet where your friends are fighting amongst themselves. I have the same friends, and my friends are fighting amongst themselves. So one of them says, hey, you know, I'm going to look at this universe from my physical eyes. And the other one says, listen, buddy, you got to look at this from the soul eyes. And then you have the plasmatic reality and saying, okay, well, which one do I listen to? And I have to make a decision. And too many of us have disconnected from the soul. We're paying attention only to the physicality. But we understand the emotion with respect to the physicality. But, you know, we only recognize what we see. Well, can you see the emotion? The only way that you can see the emotion is when someone is freaking out, and then you say, oh, well, they're having an emotional breakdown. So the emotional breakdown is what, a physical manifestation? Yeah, it then becomes a physical manifestation of the emotional substructure. So that's not an emotional breakdown, that's a physical breakdown based on the emotional disconnection. Okay, well, each of these is operating at a different field strength, at a different energy level. And we know this because the GANS, which is physical, is also a lie detector, is also a love detector. So we have a physical byproduct that has an emotional affinity. And we have water, which is a physical byproduct, an elemental compound made from hydrogen and oxygen in its pure form, and it's physical, but it has an emotional affinity also. So our physical body has an emotional affinity. Our GANS has an emotional affinity. The water has an emotional affinity. Therefore, the earth must have an emotional affinity as well, because let's face it, most of the earth is covered by water. So there's the connection. So now, who's the boss? And are you going to choose the weakest to be the boss? So in other words, if you're crossing the bridge and the bridge is collapsed and the leader jumps off the bridge, you're going to follow that leader, or are you going to have some kind of smarts to decide, hey, wait a second, that's not correct. You're following the wrong progress. That is actually telling you that you're on the wrong road. So you don't go to the end of the bridge and fall off. You have to turn back around and go through another path. And so we're going to talk about that more next week, but specifically to answer your question, when you're thinking from the physical reality point of view, you have to understand that the physical reality is a manifestation of what your soul is thinking. But not only, because your soul is interacting with the soul of the body. Well, if the soul of the body is not connected to the soul of the man, it has to be connected to something. So with respect to the man space, it would be connected to the soul of the cell, right? Because if the soul of the man body is not functioning properly, that will manifest as a physical disability. But just like your neighbors, if your neighbor is sick, your neighbor is part of your community, so your community is sick, isn't it? So you're part of the earth space community. And so if you're sick, then the earth space is sick also. And so the soul of the man body obviously connects to the soul of the earth body. And so now there's another sequence. And can you discount that? Well, no, you're on Earth. Hello. And you want to go to Mars? You're going to take that baggage with you? No. No, you don't take that baggage. You know why? Because that's a physical manifestation of your failure to communicate on this planet. So if you want to go to another planet and you want to go through the emotional vanishing point, then you have to want to be healthy. You have to want to be in line with the universal community. You want to understand and follow the universal laws, because the universal laws promote life. And the man-made laws are conditional. And that condition puts limitations on us. Now, the whole purpose, implied purpose of the man-made laws is to facilitate organization. But I think you can see that with the periodic table of elements that the universal laws are doing a really, really good job of organizing. And so you now have to decide. And you can make a conscious decision. But again, that's done on a lower energy level. You have to do this on an unconscious level. And you have to trust that. And you know why you can trust that? Because you were born. You were born without your conscious interaction. Your conscious interaction came after the fact. Okay? And who's your best friend? Hello, it's your soul. Well, if you can't depend on your friend, then that's not a friend. And your soul will never let you down and will never guide you the wrong way, because the soul obeys the universal laws. And so if we have those who are universally lawless, then they have disconnected from their soul. Can we reconnect that? No, we can just facilitate that unconditionally. They have to connect. And, you know, the soul is operating at a higher field strength. So, you know, the scales of energy transmission has changed. How am I doing, Claudia?
You're doing very well.
Well,
Oh, Claudia,
I
you've changed your
listen-
voice.
She's
I
changed her
listen
look.
1,000 times.
Could I share the screen for a moment for Claudia and the rest of us?
Yes,
Yes.
And
I
then
just didn't
take
hear
it-
what.
Go
Mark,
ahead.
I just didn't hear what Claudia's comment, please. Claudia, can you repeat your comment for me?
No, I said that I hear your voice 1,000 times. This your answer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful question.
Okay.
you.
For Claudia and the rest of us, I just happen to be scrolling through the Keshe Foundation website, and if you go under plasma, and this is the last one, emotions and soul. And again, I thought I'd bring this into group 4 and 6, create an emotional balancing device, but this must be very important. It's from the 167th Knowledge Seekers Workshop. And maybe, Claudia, you can study this and bring us a teaching. Apparently, there's quite a bit in here about the emotions and its relationship to plasma technology. So we're going to read through this week. I've never read through this, but I just, again, the title is The Role of Emotions in Plasma Technology, again, from the 167th Knowledge Seekers Workshop. So go ahead, Alex, take the screen back, please.
Thank you, Mark, to share. Thank you very much.
That was very timely, Mark.
It was. I was wondering why I had it saved. Well, I knew it was for that, but she just brought it up, and I thought, wow, this is something I hadn't studied. I mean, we're studying it, but there's an endless amount of knowledge about each subject.
And you probably got Randy excited because there's a kitty cat in there.
With a butterfly on his nose. Francine, you have your mic open. Is there something you wanted to share? Or would you like me to close it for you? All right, I can.
Alex, I'm sorry, not Alex. Mark, did you say it's in the actual workshop? Because that looked like something that had been redone.
No, this is from the actual website, Keshe.Foundation. And if you go under it, it says home, about, plasma, education, store, and links at the top. If you go under plasma, it's the last subject. And this is what, when you click on it, that's what appears. And apparently there's a number of citations from the 167th Knowledge Seekers Workshop. So it must be quite important since they put this on the website.
On the website of Keshe, it's Keshe Foundation, KFS.
Keshe.Foundation, yeah.
Okay.
And under plasma, the last entry is the role of emotions in plasma technology.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much for all of us to study. It's just endless. Alex, you talked about the ethos of the universe, that plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. And we know that we're here to serve and not to be served, and the stronger feeds the weaker, but Could you open that up a little bit more? That plasma is bound. I know Mr. Kesh mentioned something about this or something similar to this about receiving. And he said it works the same way across the entire universe, the plasma. About, he was talking about, I think, with the head units, and once you lock into a field or you think you have that field, he said there's still another key to receive that field. You have to be humble. And then he went on to, this is what I was going to play earlier, but about becoming equal to the lamb so that the lamb could feed you. You have to have this humbleness, and this arrogance will just push you farther away. So would you like to say more about this plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe?
This is an extremely difficult subject to understand, because where we've seen it work is when the group gets together, each one is contributing to the field strength. So if we were to say that the magrav's in balance, and so therefore it's invisible. It's like in the cup of Gans, you know, you have the hole in the Gans. So that's the magrav point in the center. But there's an interaction. And so you don't see the interaction, but there has to be an action, because that field has a boundary. And so to maintain that boundary, energy has to come in and go out. So you have to recognize that energy is always in motion there. And you have to see in your mind's eye that energy coming in and going out. And then you look at the different environment. So you have the air, you have the water, you have the Gans, you have the glass bottle, you have the maker of the Gans, you have the observer of the Gans, then you have the environment being the earth space as well. All of these things come together and contribute, and they all function the same way, you see. So they're all contributing energy. So if there's a need for more energy, then that gets supplemented automatically. But if there's no need, then that energy will not be absorbed. So if you don't understand that, look at what's the opposite. Someone comes in who is sapping energy, who's stealing energy. The whole rotating field not only slows down, but it'll actually come down to a stop. So something has caused a change in the field rotation. Now you take that person out of that environment, that field will begin rotating again. What? What's changed? What has changed is that you already have a pattern that you've set up to attract the energy. And you've removed the disruption. You've removed the blockage. So now you've created a pathway that is unobstructed. That's the universal law. It's unconditional. And except for the condition is that it provides for life. And I guess, you know, we can look at a discussion with respect to the creator and say, well, you know, you created everything, and some things are good and some things are bad. Well, would you knowingly create something bad if you were the creator? So how can you create something that's bad? And what does it mean to be bad? Well, when you start to break the universal laws, that's bad. And the creator would never do that. That's the universal law. It's only man would do that. And the reason we do that is because we have a delay in consequences on this planet, which is a unique characteristic of physicality. And that may be the defining criteria why the universal community cannot partake in this heaven on earth, which they do desperately want to partake in. But I think, just like us, they're running out of patience. And the reason for it is because, you know, the knowledge keeps coming. But just like some of the gamma rays on this planet, they just pass right on through. So in one ear and out the other. We need to start absorbing this. And once we start absorbing it, we will have the energy supplementation, and then things will work out. So in order to allow that to happen, we have to stop saying to the universe to shut up. We have to stop saying to the, hey, we came here based on your rules, but now that we're here, we're going to have our rules. Oh, really? So you're going to dictate terms. On what basis do you have the authority to dictate terms? Because no one has the authority to dictate terms. That's what creation is all about. It's unconditional. The moment you dictate terms, you're dictating conditions. Well, when we're in an environment where there's a delay in consequences, in order to maintain that sequence and that balance of incentives and the balance of consequences, then you have to put conditions.
Thank you,
But-
Alex. I'm going to
But
listen
what's
to
the
that.
intention?
Yeah, I'm going to listen to that again.
But what's the intention? Okay, so the intention likewise has to be pure. Thanks, Mark.
Yes. And you've just mentioned the creator a couple of times just now, and of course in your presentation as well. You said energy can't be in two places at the same time. Is that exclusive of Mitra and the creator? Or even us, if your physicality is on the planet and you're traveling in the soul dimension, the physicality is still in the unit, but you're on the moon in the energy state. Are there two energies in two places? Or is this only reserved for the creator and Mitra?
Okay, so two answers to the one question. First of all, we're created in the image of the creator. So we have the same capability. Second, when you look at the cover of book number 1 and you see the creation of matters, you see 3 different energy states. So it's a hybrid. So the first answer is these are different energies at different states. And so they represent different energies. What we're talking about is one energy being in 2 different places. That's an impossibility. But part of that maggraph can donate energy magnetically. This is the giving. Now what happens? You can follow that path. And how much you follow with determines your transmutation. So the soul can go, the soul with the soul of the body can go, the soul of the body, the soul of the self can go. And now we have the new technology, unprecedented. We can add the physical body as well. We have to recognize that this is a new technology. It is, as far as I'm concerned, I've never heard of this before. And so is it possible? Well, look at what's missing. The connection between the soul and the soul of the body is totally missing, because if the soul of the body has an opportunity to delay the consequences and to be delinquent in its responsibility, and the soul of the man is your friend and will never violate the universal laws, then that clearly demarks a difference and a boundary and a barrier and a wall disruption of communication. And it's self-inflicted. So if it can be self-inflicted, it can be self-uninflicted.
So when we dream, now, two different energies. Obviously, the physicality is still operating in the bed, but the soul energy, it goes out across the universe and maybe interacts with the mother or the grandmother. So is that the same energy, or are those two different energies?
It's the same flavor of energy, but there's two different energy field strengths. See, Mark, if you're going out like you just described, you have to be tethered. You have to be able to come back. And so there has to be a connection. And that connection is, in terms of physicality, is carbon-14. But not only. That's connection. But, we're all connected by carbon-14. So, you go on a dream and then you come back into my body. Well, gee whiz, man, I'll kick you out so fast you won't believe it. So you are precise in your target shooting. When you wake up in the morning, you'll come back into your own body. And if you're confident, you'll wake up fresh and refreshed. But if you're doubtful, you might be a little bit cranky, or you say, oh, well, I got up on the wrong side of the bed. Well, then what you have to do is you have to go back to bed for about 20 to 30 minutes and realign your soul within your body so that you feel comfortable. And most of us don't feel comfortable in our bodies because we allow other people to influence us. Well, then the rule comes that nothing anybody says or does can affect you unless you allow it. Well, I didn't know that I had the responsibility. Well, yes, you do. You do have the responsibility, but I don't want responsibility. Well, that's the malaise of the society. You have to have responsibility. And now, as a knowledge seeker, you have inherited that responsibility, whether you wanted to or not. And you know why? Because that's what your soul wants anyway. And your soul is your friend. So, the sooner we stop protesting to that, the sooner we'll bring on the change. And then the only question now becomes the rate of change. Well, can we facilitate that? Well, if we're going, in the physical place at 1 kilometer per hour, or we go in the soul where we go 10 to the power of 18, we can go much faster. And so that's where we're at. We are going to facilitate the rate of change much faster.
Thank you. All right, let's hear from one of the other experienced knowledge seekers who may have a question or a statement or just something they'd like to share. I know there's been a lot of talk, Alex, about this headphone, and make sure you have the right one in the right ear and the left. Some of them are labeled. I heard Azar saying she had to turn her phone upside down. I thought Mr. Kesh said that the system is connected on the right side, but if you put your headphone in on the right side, of course, I don't quite understand all this. Isn't that to the left hemisphere of the brain? Because the left side controls your right side of your body. Your right side, as I understand it, controls the left side. Just wondering if you wanted to open that up at all.
Mark, the microphone is the one that dominates. The microphone has to be on the right side.
Right. but he said our system is set for the right side, didn't he? But my right
Well,
ear
the
is he,
microphones are normally on the right side. That's why.
right,
That's
but
why.
my right ear is being interpreted by my left hemispheric part of the brain.
But why are you
No,
putting that
no,
into
Mark.
the mixture?
But
I'm
just a
sorry.
What
question.
about a left-hander?
Okay.
Your ear is the same side of your brain. After I don't know in English, the decusação das pirâmides in the bulbo. I have to put him to translate.
Okay, the ear's got a pass on that, because I always thought it was the left side controlling the right side of the physicality.
Your body, yes, your body is the opposite side, but your ears, no.
Okay, very good. Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem.
I think we have an up and coming, we're all teachers, of course. Thank you, Claudia. Anyone else would like to come in and pose a question? And what made you bring up all these moons, Alex, and things? Were the moons already always there, but we never noticed them? Was the planet adding material to the moon? Did it capture another object passing through its fields? And that's what created the moon? Because I don't know what it jumped from, but you said it went to 92 moons? Was it?
Well, Mark, you know, it's been over 50 years since we've been back to the moon, right? They say. And our moon is the closest of all the moons. And yet, you know, here we have this revelation this week on another 12 moons in Jupiter. But, you know, the thing is, this all came up was because we are planning the transmutation to the moon and also planning the transmutation to Mars, right? And what's the difference between the moon and the Mars? Because the moon has a space and the Mars has a space. So in that regard, there's no difference. It's just that the Mars is in the sun space field, whereas the moon, our moon, is in the Earth space field. But other than that, that's the only difference. So we are in this race to go to the moon, obviously. And so now all of a sudden, these revelations are coming out with all these other moons all over the place. And we still haven't seen the other side of our moon, have we? And,
Yeah,
you know,
Alex.
But I was asking, did the moons get created by Jupiter? Did it capture an object passing through that got held there? Or were they always there and we never noticed?
They must be very small, and we haven't seen them with the telescopes we have here. That must be the thing. Now, I've not been told, but I've read about our moon is a spaceship, an old spaceship, which was put there, and in the last 10 to 12,000 years, just to create the Van Allen belt. And it's got a holographic image on this our side. And that's the way it's been positioned is very specific. That's why we have a very special eclipse that coincides with the size of the moon and the sun. And
that is amazing. Yes.
Yeah, there are too many coincidences. Astronomically, or if you want it mathematically, it's 1 in 10 million, the possibility.
but either way, John, the moon is physical. And we know it's spherical.
Well, a ship is physical also.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, here we are, and we've never seen the other side of the moon. Well,
yes, they have with the
China's
satellite.
been there. China has
Yeah,
photographed it
exactly.
and so on and so forth. I think John's referring to when they dropped something on the moon, it rang like a bell for
Yeah, that's
hours.
one of the
Again,
reasons.
we don't know, John, if that's just being reported that way or that actually happened. But which
It's happened several times.
being interpreted would mean that the moon is rather hollow. And this is where the idea, I believe,
that's
of
why
the
it rings.
spaceship. Yeah.
And we're told by ETs, if you want to call them that way.
I haven't explored the moon. I was only there for a few seconds. And I didn't want to be there, so I left.
You don't want to be lonely there.
Yeah, it did look rather desolate to me. And I said, wait a minute, I don't want to be here.
Where's my American flag? They have to put the American flag everywhere.
okay, so the lesson to be learned here is that there's doubt, there's inconsistency in the stories, and the one consistency is that the moon's been here, all of our lives. So
the thing is, we're believing in many scientists with their theories, but we don't believe in what other chaps from outer space have told us.
Yeah, but we have sent a satellite around the moon, and
yes,
that's
but what does that tell you? If you got,
I don't know. Well, let's see the pictures.
Yeah, well, you only see dust and rocks on something spherical.
Maybe a few structures, perhaps, has been rumored.
There are very strange structures up to 18 meters tall have been pictured, but they won't show you the pictures. How come the pictures that were taken when they were on the moon have all disappeared? There's no more.
They misplaced them, John.
Pardon?
They misplaced them.
Yeah, millions of pictures and they disappeared.
Yeah, so you can see that we have been able to count 92 moons around Jupiter, but we haven't seen our moon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And you don't know if those moons are really moons, because we're told also many of those moons are habited by ETs watching us.
Well, the interesting thing was that they knew the direction of rotation of those moons. So we have this detail. And so some moons rotate one direction or another direction, or they just wobble.
Yeah.
And ours is a wobbler, but we have some satellites around, and we have had people
and I think
in them.
Yeah, the Uranus at the way it turns around is its axis is practically horizontal with the plane of the sun and the rest of the satellite. Yes.
Yeah, so we seem to know more about that planet than we do about our own planet.
Yeah.
Okay, so you could clearly see that there's a problem with that. There's a gap in the knowledge stream. So when people say, "Oh, this is you're being a skeptic," or "This is not real," or well, what you have to ask the question is, why is it not real? Because it's there. We know that the moon is there, but it's the nature of the beast here. And what I'm saying is, I brought up the context of the family, and I know Irmgard is at the meeting here, and we've all felt the wrath of the family. And the interesting thing is that the family is not exercising any wrath on those who are suppressing the information.
Yeah.
You know, so like
But we've
if,
also got to believe in old civilizations. The Mayans tell us the moon wasn't there beforehand. And they've been here for 120, 130,000 years.
Yeah, I had heard that in some of the ancient writings, there was no report of the moon. But I
Exactly.
thought the interaction with the sun and the earth created the moon. I'm not sure, but again, these could be just speculations and rumors. But I had heard that in the ancient writings, maybe they're talking about the Maya, I don't know. I think they just referred to ancient writings. There was no report of a moon. But again, this could just be, again, I think we've
How can you
gotten
hide
more.
it?
yeah, so you see the I Ching as 64 codons, 64 triplets, and you look at the DNA as 64 triplets, so
Yeah,
the RNA
exactly.
64 triplets. Is that a coincidence, or is that the knowledge? And is it exclusively in the books, or is it in the clothing that the Atlanteans wore? So there's different ways to transmit the information. So the obvious one is the physical transmutation. But the less obvious, of course, is the plasmatic way of doing it. And
Yep.
frankly, until we got into the Keshe Foundation, and so let me just speak on my own behalf. You know, I only got half the story. I got the physical science, and then I got the other half. And does that make sense? Well, because of course, how do you get back? If you're going somewhere, how do you come back? How do you know to come back? You know, if you were to go to the grocery store in your car, okay, you can't see your home from the grocery store. How do you know to go back? Or how did you know to go in the first place? Or you move into a new town, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to ask someone, oh, where do you do your shopping? Right? And then they're going to tell you and give you directions. So once you have that, now you have a mental construct. So you follow that. Well, that mental construct is not the same energy as your physical energy. So now you've sent a mental construct that is representative of your energy, has the same flavor, and that is to say, well, here's the store, and I know that you want to come here, so follow my, shall we say, my magnetical signal, and you will get here. And so that's what you have to do. And you have to do this in a clear-minded way because you don't want to get into an accident. So there has to be a pure intention. I want to get there, but I don't want to have an accident along the way. But again, not doesn't work. So you have to be positive. I want to get there. I want to get there safely. And this is the phenomenon that we had since June the 6th. We've sent over several hundred people into outer space safely, and they've come back safely. We haven't lost a single person. So what does that mean? That means there's an integrity, there's a consistency. And why wouldn't there be a consistency? Because the intention is in line with the plasma energy, which is in line with the universal laws, which is in line with your soul, which is in line with the creator. So, what's the problem? So it's a confidence. If you rely on the confidence of your physicality, you're working from the lowest place. But if you're working from your soul level, and it's not a matter that, you have to clench your fist and make a grimace on your face. I'm going to work with my soul level now. Well, this is not something that you have to do. It's like automatic. It's who you are. Just allow it to happen. It's the same way you go to sleep at night. As long as you know that you're in a safe place and you're going into a benevolent universe, you'll fall asleep right away. And you'll have some interesting journeys. So, and then, each one of us has our own journey. So And it's not just plasmatically, we have a journey physically as well. So this is a feature. The heaven on earth is a feature. It's a characteristic and a embellishment that we have access to. This is not a negative connotation. So we have undermined it and sabotaged it with our own lack of understanding, because we've depended on other people to give us that, and the source of their inspiration is from a physical standpoint. You connect your source of inspiration to the soul, and the soul will always guide you properly and will facilitate everything that happens. And then as a result, you yourself would become a universal facilitator. So this is the thing. You have to go with the right intention.
Alex, I
Hi.
just wanted to, hi. First of all, the little picture, that's the back of the little gingerbread boy, right? And
No, that's the front.
oh, that's
Can't you tell the difference?
I'm glad I asked. Okay, no, that's fine. And then the other thing that I want to ask, it's a beautiful gingerbread boy, don't worry. The other thing that crossed my mind, we talk about the moon, and that there was no mention of it for those 100,000 years previous. We have the 12,500 year when the floods came, and what happens with our moon is we have tides, and you know, all the incredible changes in our oceans due to the moon. So I'm just wondering if maybe there is some truth that it wasn't there before, and that caused a lot of the deluge. I'm just thinking, you know, that I have no idea.
I was just thinking too, Gail, and I remember in one of the private teachings, Mr. Kesh said the moon doesn't have any influence on the tides. It's the rising up of the continents or something along that line. But I believe he said specifically that the moon has no influence on these tides. We can go
So
back
that means
and
that
check
the
Yeah.
continents have to be sort of floating
Yeah,
like
they
a
are.
dinghy, a little dinghy. You know how the little dinghy is
Mhm.
always bouncing up and down beside the boat. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. Oh my, that's
We've
interesting.
got a lot to learn.
Yeah. How do you know, Gail? How do you know? Look at the size. Look at the size relationship difference between the moon and the Earth. Are you telling me that that little tiny thing is having this massive influence?
I'm not telling you anything, Alex. I'm just saying that
No,
all
but I
my
mean,
life.
I never questioned that, okay, because I don't want to question the authority. I mean, I was like everybody
Yes.
else, you know. Yeah, I went to school. Oh, is that right? Oh, yeah, sure. You know,
Yeah.
but
That's why he says man's knowledge has just reached about 1 grain of all the sand on all the beaches, and you can probably include the ocean floor as well.
But it is interesting that with the moon cycles, we do have changes in our tides. So then that means that if the continent bodies are kind of floating and causing this, then somehow, I mean, what
yes,
what role does the moon play? That's the
the
question.
the moon is magnetical. The Earth has gravitational stability, and so it's counteracting the magnetical field strength of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
It has to.
So somehow our continents, the way that they kind of float up and down, I'm sure there's a whole lot more involved.
Well, the
with
Earth wobbles on its own as well.
And the magma, I mean, what effect does that have? Because
well, I don't know. Next time you're carrying a bowl of soup, see if you can walk across the room without spilling on the carpet.
I don't have a carpet, so how am I going to figure that one out?
Well, you
Try to find
do
that
what I
teaching.
do, and you don't You don't walk over a carpet. You walk over a floor that you can clean up the mess.
Yeah, that's very
And,
interesting.
and you make sure you don't make any sudden stops either.
Oh, you're gonna tip over.
Well, that's why they say don't drink and drive, right? There's so many bumps in the road.
Oh, really? I don't drink, so I don't know about that part of it. About the beer and all the rest. I don't do that. Okay, so anyway, now you've really filled my head with something. I'm going to be dreaming about this.
Okay, what
We'll
about
find out more tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
Gail.
but what about the one, Mark and Gail? What about the one where Mr. Kesh said that I believe that the pulse of the heart affects the circulation. Well, he's disconnected that relationship also. That was what, about a month ago?
I forgot all about it, but I remember being amazed at what I did hear. How did it, can you remember all the details?
Well, it's our interpretation that the heart is a pump.
Oh, okay. Well,
because we need the blood to move, right?
Mm-hmm. But the blood is, and the arteries and everything are very powerful. Oh, no, it's the interstitial fluid too, isn't it?
Well, yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's a crossover point between the arteries and the veins, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
You know, so if we were to say that the heart is a pump, and you know, like I mean, there's truth to that. And if we were to say that the blood flows gravitationally, you know, so there would be truth to that. But if the blood does flow to your feet, it also flows back up.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, how does this all work? And so there is a physical aspect to it. But the thing is that when you look at an X-ray, you not only do you not have any blood, but you don't have any cells. The only thing that you see in an X-ray is your skeleton and any cancerous tissue, which would darken because it has manifested physically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's plasma that we're dealing with.
Right, and it's in balance, so it's transparent.
Oh, wow, that's a good point.
Isn't it? Oh, how humble we should be. I think Dean has opened his mic a couple times. Gail, did you finish?
Thank you.
Finish, Gail?
Yes, done. Thanks.
Okay.
That's enough. That's enough.
Yeah.
Is that enough, or is that too much? Thanks a lot, Gail.
Shake your paradigm a little. Dean, welcome.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I've been listening away. Thank you. Wonderful teaching again, Alex. Thank you very much, and everybody else that's participating and bringing the conversation along. So my understanding is, if I can just quickly say that if you have a cell and it receives lots of different magnetic fields, and it accumulates into the matter state. So it receives what it needs, and what it doesn't need would be like the cancer. It would collect in another position. So this would be the moon. The moon is like a huge vacuum. It collects up all the Earth's deposits and spectrum of magnetical fields that the Earth cannot absorb, and it is collected onto the moon. And this becomes like I said, a big vacuum that collects all the waste and all the materials, the fields that the Earth cannot absorb. So that's, to my understanding, that's something I know Mr. Kesh said a little while ago. On another front, just like to quickly bring something up that was I've been doing some teachings recently and making some cup of lives, and I've posted a few, and I've noticed that I've been using some of the salts from my 5-cup stacker system and other people's thoughts and intentions. And these manifestations of the cups have been growing very, very quickly. They've literally before our eyes last night, there was there were 4 cups made, and 2 of them were made and put to the side, and where the water was not introduced because they were going to be traveling back to their home. And 2 cups were produced on the actual evening, and this is one of many to follow, because this could expand out into something quite big. These cups were manifested at an extremely fast rate. It was normally when you add up batteries, we know that you get this this build-up of the bubbling on the surface of the zinc and everything, and but this was happening within 1.5 hours. There was a good 1.5 centimeters of GANs at the bottom, and amino acids were starting to form. And then another person actually started their cup this morning, our CET time, and by late afternoon, they had amino acids and the salt buildup starting on top of the actual jar itself. So the manifestations are becoming quicker and quicker. And I gave these particular energy workers a lot of beautiful information, and they were putting in incredible intention and thoughts into these cups, and they realized what the significance of the soul present, and they were manifesting very, very beautiful intentions that I know will help to cleanse and bring about many balances and energy frequencies and field strengths that will bring about beauty throughout, not just this part of Austria that I'm in, but across, because these people that are knowledge seekers in a new sense, however, they have wisdoms from many other aspects, and now they're bringing in that knowledge into the cups, and it is amplifying the fields tremendously, and it's a joy to be present and to see the manifestations happen so quickly. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I sensed it, and I feel that I've noticed, as you said, that reconnection with the fields happens almost instantaneously once you open up to it once more, because you've already created the field flow, and then when you start to allow and become balanced again, it starts to flow again very quickly, and if not, it becomes even more intense. I've noticed. I know I sense certain beings and certain situations constantly now. It's a constant flow of interactions in micro and macro, and it's quite fascinating to when you actually tap into it, you start to understand a tiny fraction of it. It's a wonderful process, and we're all part of it. So thank you, Alex, thank you, Mark, thank you all. That's just my little addition to the conversation.
And Dean, before you rush away, what kind of cups were they making? Cup 1?
Just cup 1 for now. I've given them some of the knowledge, but it was literally just, it was cup 1. But we were using very good quality copper, multi-stranded copper, and we were using good quality zinc, and doing the nano-coating by a fire process in the moment. But these guys, they have a lot of knowledge, and I know they know about the foundation, have worked within the, they know within the foundation, not within it, but they know of the foundation, and they know of the foundation's work, and now they're applying it with their knowledge of being healers. And as I said, the amino acids and the growth in it was quite extraordinary. And I know these cups, once we start, I know it's an older technology, but having said that, it's still very relevant, and it's building up a beautiful field strength. And yeah, it was wonderful to see, and it is wonderful to see these cups connecting up and these souls manifesting. And when you explain to people that it is, if you keep giving to the cups like it was your own child, so keep literally love it as it was a child in physicality, give to it, and the manifestation, as I said, is immense, and they grow And it is all the intention. There was one person there, I think, that may have influenced it, who has a very fast tempo in life. And so I think the manifestation matched the solar physicality. The others seem to be a little bit more slower paced. And so they're the ones who took the cups back home and did them in their own time. However, the manifestation was then very quick, like I say, within a day. We're talking, I've sent a picture across one of the Telegram groups that I've got going very, it's an old one that's been going slowly. And the picture is quite amazing for such a young cup, how much activity is present within that cup. It's a beauty.
Well, thanks for the inspiration. I'm about to make some and clean first, and I do have the proper copper. I think there's 42 strands in it, if you can believe it. So
wow.
I'm gonna,
right,
yeah. You have to pay more for the wiring, but they do have them. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's the usual thing with knowledge seekers when they come together. The materials I had was all donated by beautiful knowledge seekers that understand the beauty of it, and it is that sharing that. So you have the intention of the knowledge seeker giving, then you have the intention of when you're actually giving the knowledge yourself. So you have two field strength into matching, two souls of physicality possibly. And then you have the intentions of the students and their interactions, and all these fields, as we know, these interactions, and Ms. Kess described it very recently, where we have every single part of us has been part of another over many parts of time and space and position. So, all those field strengths that are made up of yourself, myself, of everything, has been part of something else. And so I think that cosmic ray initiation is a very prevalent or beautiful thing that's happening at the moment. And I think there's a big conscious soul awakening to this. So the souls have always been awake, but the soul of physicality is starting to understand this. And I've noticed that I've been posting a few things on Twitter, a few sort of like things that I just do because I just want to connect an audience to the technology. So I have to go to the level that they respond to. So this is all about vaccinations and things. But then you gradually start to introduce the technology of the foundation and some of the ethos and things, and you can see, and you give some wishes and intentions, and you can see you can sense the interactions amongst the souls. And I know there's a few souls there that are, the 1/3 being very present with this, with the tweets. So interesting times. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Dean.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something to this conversation today. Quite a while ago, Alex, in many different things, talks about the blood and the circulation of the blood. I've done a lot of work with blood in microscopes. And when we went from an ordinary standard microscope to a scanning electron microscope, and I worked with the older gentleman, he said, we can't do anything with live blood until we add carbon. If we don't add carbon and amino acids to the mixture, the machine can't detect anything of any value. He said, because you have to realize we have to write the program and tell the machine what to look for from the periodic table of elements. So that brings up a whole new paradigm of exactly what the plasma water is doing to our body and our blood, beyond their abilities to pick it up with their instrumentation. They worked for over a year and a half on the software, and they couldn't get it to work. They abandoned the project. So, folks, we're walking plasma energy units. And I've noticed the more plasma water I drink, the stronger my field strength is, and the interaction between all of nature. Go outside. Since I put the plasma energy along the fence line, we've had more animals in the yard, and they stay. They don't just walk through. The deer and the moose, they walk through, they stay around, then they leave. So animals know the presence of plasma energy as well. That's my rant for the day. Thank you.
Nice. I've noticed the same with birds. Going into the bowl I had outside almost immediately after I poured it. And I said, gee, either the bird was very thirsty, there was no water present, or it sensed the fields and was just sort of flapping in the water with its wings. It's like it was really enjoying itself. Is there someone else who would like to share something? A point? Something you didn't understand or you'd like more clarification on? We learn from each other and we're all equal. Mr. Kesh has been stressing this quite a bit, this equalness, this humbleness, and so on.
Mark, may I ask Alex a question? So, Alex, why do you sense that we as human beings, I know on this planet we manifest in the condition, with 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 lungs, 2 everything. Why do you think this is on planet Earth, that we have this construction?
I don't think it's restricted to planet Earth. So planet Earth has a variety in the periodic table of elements, and different planets will have a different selection of elements. The thing that has sent me on this path initially many years ago was the wonderment is what is the makeup of these other planets, and that always comes down to spectroscopy. And what is the spectroscopy but the signature of the atomic structure of whatever element it is? And it's a unique fingerprint. So it boiled down to the fact that hydrogen on Earth is hydrogen on the moon, is hydrogen on Mars, is hydrogen in the sun. So the whole universe is made of the same elements. And then it's just, what are the elements of choice in that particular environment? So if we can manifest our environment to suit our physicality, then we can manifest this way. And we grow used to our appearance, but if we see someone who is kind of different from our appearance, then we would label them a freak. And so, we become, I don't know, we become conflicting. And so we have to realize that this is exactly what would happen if we go to another environment that doesn't have all the elements that we're used to. We have now an opportunity to make a choice. Either we manifest again in our physicality the way we're used to on the Earth space, or we manifest into an environment that is more conducive to the environment, whatever space that is that we're going to. So, Mr. Kesh has made an extreme example, and he says, "Oh, well, what happens? You have multiple arms, and so you'd be different." Well, you could be different. Can you imagine? How would you feel? Would you be racist to yourself? you look at the reaction of a dog to a mirror, and if the dog's never seen itself, and he sees another dog, the initial reaction would be to bark at it. But is that what you would do? Would you bark at yourself? Would you smash the mirror? Would you have a violent reaction? And all that is really a racist reaction, isn't it? So, we're more familiar with us. So I think what we have to realize is that the construct that we have on this planet is a universal construct, and we come in different colors. So the color is not really a legitimate basis for discrimination. But if someone would come with 6 legs, and if they're your size, the only thing that I know that would come to something like that would be maybe an ant. And I've thought about an ant. If an ant was the size of a human, and I know an ant can lift many times its weight. I mean, can you imagine an ant the size of a human? They'd be able to lift 3 cars up in the air, and wouldn't need a tow truck. They just pick up the car and carry it home. But how would that change your life? So that's a kind of a comical way to look at it. But we're in that point now where our life is going to change, and I'm personally having difficulty coming to grips with that because I have no field of reference. I don't know what it's going to be like. And furthermore, I don't know what my neighbors are going to feel like. But one of the things that I have noticed is that as we keep moving ahead with these changes, the gap between those who are becoming aware and those who are still clueless is widening. And because of that widening in the gap, they are more angry when they find this out. So I know how angry I was when I found out. And I didn't have the knowledge of the plasma science. If the way I was angry when I found out about the true physics, and if I'd have had the plasma science on top, well, I don't know how angry I would have been. I would have been more angry. So it's a perfectly normal way to do that. So now what we have to figure out is how can we adapt to the new world, and what is the new world going to look like? And are we the ones who are going to enact the change? Well, not without the soul, because the soul is what brought us here. So therefore, the soul will be the facilitator. So we just need to go with the flow, and we have to understand that the soul is creating not only us, but it's part of the creation of the environment, and it's part of the creation of the circumstances of the environment, which we call the intention. And so when those 3 come together, that manifestation hits a certain point where all these forces converge. And if that field strength is strong enough, it'll converge into physicality. And so some people dictate what they want. So, oh, you know what I would like? I would like, $1 million. And as the one who went to the wishing well, and he created a wish, and he says to the well, I want $1 million. And so the well told him, so do I. And that's the problem. You don't dictate what you wish for in the physicality. You dictate what you wish for from the soul level, because the soul is communicating to the rest of the universe and knows what is required. How do you know what is required? You have 70 trillion cells in your body, and do you want potato chips with salt, or do you want the ripple potato chips, or do you want the ketchup flavored potato chips? Or maybe you don't want potato chips, you want peanuts or cookies. So what is the basis of your decision-making process? And so this is all cosmetic, superficial. The soul doesn't work on superficiality. It works on substance. That's why you can't fake sincerity. So the universal community has already figured out to look at the soul and to see the reality. And once I became aware of this process, I ran into a serious dilemma, and I was a novice. And that dilemma was that I could start telling how people were lying to me. And then I found that I had to pretend that I believed them. So why is it my responsibility to pretend to believe them? Why don't they just tell the truth, and then I'm liberated? But the reason is because that's what they're accustomed to, and so they are expecting me to believe it because I'm stupid, and they think I'm stupid, and so let's go with the flow and say, yeah, I'm stupid. I believe what you're saying, and so when they say, well, I promise to do this, and I say, yeah, sure, I believe you, and I want you to believe that I believe you, but you know what? I don't believe you. So that's the end of that story. And is the product of disbelief then the manifestation, or is the intention of their lying the manifestation? And this becomes another question. So I like to give the benefit of the doubt, and you can see what Mr. Kesh does. He gives the benefit of the doubt, and then they turn around and they rob him blind. Well, he's not blind, but they rob him anyway. And they say, well, you have shortchanged yourself, okay? Because if the universe is bountiful, then you can't just turn around and say, okay, enough. That's it. That's all I'm going to take. I don't want any more. This is it. This is mine. And I'm taking care of my backyard. See you later. Well, don't forget you're part of the community. So if halfway around the world people are dying by the minute in a war, and you're sitting in the comfort of your home having a chit chat, that's not the exclusive reality. That's only part of the reality. The reality is that the community is still sick, and so we have to give our time and attention to correcting that. And we can't do it on the physical basis because it's too weak. So we have to do it on the soul basis. And because the intention is true, is not fallible. It has no deficiencies except the deficiencies that we attribute to it. So if we don't have confidence, then it can't have confidence. So we just have to understand the nature on how we were born and how much confidence you had when you were born. And we have to replicate that in our understanding of the changes to come. And so I am very confident that these changes will be good. And why wouldn't it be? Everyone on this panel wants these changes to come. So what are you? Are you hypocrites? I don't think so. You wouldn't spend the time and attention to do this if it wasn't true. That's the fallacy of the skeptics in the library who wrote all those books and say, oh, well, this is bad science and this is a conspiracy theory. What? You're giving good quality time and effort and your skills to debunk something that it may not have been proven true because we didn't have the equipment. But our society has a problem. I don't need equipment to figure that out, do I? That's a given. So why are you wasting time, debunking someone who's trying to correct things? And so following up on what Randy has said, this is very interesting because the Gaston-Nasons had the same problem with the somatoscope. That microscope is illegal. And what about the oscilloscope that Mr. Kesh is using to track the pattern of the souls on the December the 16th and January the 20th expedition. That's a special piece of equipment. So if we have an unprecedented scientific breakthrough, then we have to have the equipment that's unprecedented also to align with it. And so clearly we have achieved that because he's interpreting the results. And so those are not music notes, and they've been done wirelessly. And so they're done on a plasmatic level. So there's proof. So let's carry on with that path with confidence, and let's enjoy life and make sure that our neighbors look at it the same way, not from a point of conflict or a point of fear, but a point of benevolence and abundance. Thank you all for allowing me to present today. What a great day.
Thank you, Alex. Wonderful today. Wonderful. Alex, can I just quickly say, so there are the understanding through the foundation and the interactions that we're having, the soul of man as one soul would be connecting with the soul of another race, the soul of a planet, the soul of a galaxy, the soul of the creator. So they're all entities that are interacting, having field interactions constantly. We're all part of, as souls, interconnecting into one soul, one plasma, and then that one plasma connecting to another cell, another plasma of a bigger plasma. And even the plasmas that we've been shown and we've come to understand may be only a small fraction of the totality. It may be much bigger than this. So if it's unlimited, then once we open ourselves up to this, and once people become aware, once they become, as you said, they become angry, and some are angry because this is in the physical form that they've had a position that has been they've been shaken awake. Some people and some entities, some souls, and it's that process that is quite hard to go through. It's like when you have an interaction of energies, and one energy is a lot stronger and one is a lot weaker, then the weaker one may feel that it's been overpowered. It depends how the energy is transferred. And so when the awakening is rocks your world, rocks your physicality, and gives you a slight hello, you are present, and the soul of physicality is giving you a catch up, and the soul is aware and guiding. Then it's a process that can take within the structure and can send ripples through the structure and create other plasmas along the way. And I think this is probably a good thing. And it's all part of a much bigger process. And if this one soul, that is the soul of humanity, is becoming plasmatic, which has always been, but is now radiating and becoming of a higher order through the knowledge and the teachings that are being given, then as part of the structure, as these souls, these stars come together and gradually become part of the same structure, then this elevation happens obviously quicker and quicker. And I sense that, as I said earlier, with the cups, that timeline that doesn't exist, but that instant of the plasma is starting to the cosmic ray interactions through the knowledge that Mr. Kesh is spreading is interacting much quicker now, and it's establishing a that superhighway, that superstructure through to take the taxi to another place, whether it's across the planet or whether it's across a nation or a cell or a universe. It's all the same. And so for some souls, this is it's a, as I said, it's a shaking process, and so it can be difficult. However, they once they start to settle into it and establish themselves as they nestle up, the energies next to the next energy and start to relax, then it starts to manifest. So it's a gradual process. And thank you, Alex, for your teachings, because that you've established a very wonderful way to deliver the plasma so people can understand it. So thank you, Alex.
And it's my pleasure, and your comments are most welcome. Point that I didn't emphasize strong enough, and I'm going to do it right now. What is the position of inert gases? Because we have natural creation and we have natural decay. But we have that third mystery, this catalytic conversion. So it is impossible for these inert gases to not interact. It's impossible. So to call them unreactive is, contrary to physics. They wouldn't exist if they didn't react. But what they are unreactive in terms of thermodynamics or chemically, or actually that's an extension of physically. So if they are reactive, when I'm saying that they are reactive as a catalyst, then what are the reference points? And so I think what we've seen, and I'm pretty clear minded anyway, that it's well represented in the patents, that this is the crossover point between the physical and the plasmatic fields, and it's catalytic. That's what makes it possible. And we know that it is possible because, hello, sunshine, you come every day and you're unconditional. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Alex. Perhaps we should, instead of using inert, we should use intelligent gases. I think Mr. Kesh said we're just a combination of intelligent gases. I think Anna wanted to come in and share something before we get ready to, yes.
Yes, I just want to share my love and appreciation for these conversations, and my desire to continue to learn and advance to the next level. I do have a logistic question though, and is in reference to the uses of plasma water in our day-to-day living. I know there is a lot of information. I have gotten different ways of getting it, but I have basic cans like zinc gas and the CO2 gases, and I of course have the plasma water. Is there anything practical? I'm using it that could, solidify the knowledge at this moment that could be reemphasized to me, please?
Can I answer that question? So what we're talking about is peace and harmony. So the question that is begged is peace and harmony connected to what? And so peace and harmony connected to whatever. And you have to understand that you have an emotional construct, and that is susceptible to the tuggings of peaceful serenity, cooperation, and harmony in your life. So the practical application is the benefits that it gives to your emotional stability. And so in that process, that emotional stability manifests the gravitational stability of the emotion. it is from there that it can manifest into a physical stability as well. And so you find that if you bring a plasma unit into the house, like a cup of life, that's the first thing that it'll affect you. It'll give you a calmness and a serenity. Now, if you are really open to it, then I think, like Dean described, the reaction is going to be much faster. And so this is what we all have to look at, is that not only individually is our reaction faster, but collectively it's faster. We have to recognize that through all the years of teaching, we know more than we did years ago, and there's more of us than there were years ago. So that's a double benefit. And as a result, that becomes an exponential benefit. So this is one of the reasons we're seeing these excellent reactions that are coming out. And so, you know, you've now become part of the process. And so you now need to look at it through a different set of eyes when you're looking at your cup of life, because you have to see that it's giving and taking energy, and it's taking the energy that it needs, and it takes it from the source that it wants. And the source that it wants is the source that is going to provide the energy that it needs. And then when it has this energy that it needs, which is high in emotional field strength, who needs that benefit? Is it you, or is it someone else in the family? Or is it just the environment? And so you'll find that it's D, all of the above. And each one needs it differently, and so each one will take differently, but the cup of life will provide unconditionally. And so that's the first step. And once you have that, now you have the emotion of presence being affected by the emotion of position. And this is now taking you in a much better direction. Immediately, you have enlisted the services of a higher order of magnitude energy field strength. Thank you for this excellent question.
Alex, just so you know, you just mentioned something there. So I know that the souls are connecting. And so when I was making the cups yesterday, someone gave me a gift to say thank you for the knowledge and everything. And it was some essential oils. One of them is harmony, and one of them is abundance, the name of them. And it's funny how you just mentioned those names. So it's that constant interaction of the souls being present. And once you reach a certain higher strength, not necessarily no one's higher, no one's lower. I don't mean that in any way to be everybody's the same. But once you reach a certain field strength, you then start to establish a connection. You reach another isotope. You reach another position of a amino acid structure. You connect with the next level that gives you a conscious ability to interact, not necessarily with your thoughts, but with the interaction of the matter state, so that you allow others who have, however you want to call it, a field strength, a beauty, I wouldn't say an intellect, but maybe it is an intellect. They have an ability to be present in that particular sphere of the viewpoint. And as you elevate, they become aware, or you become aware of them, and you start to elevate and expand out. And then those souls, entities, beings can be present with you. So, and this is all part of the GANS process and part of the elevation. As we elevate more, the universal community and others are able to be amongst us, to be aware of us, and to show themselves in very many different shapes and forms. As we know, the 1/3 that are present on the planet, that are not from the planet, are able to see you and see the ability of the structure of you to be able to communicate.
So you're missing one essential.
Tell me then, please.
Sincerity.
Oh.
Maybe that 1/3 is providing that for you because you're successful.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Alex. Let's take the last 15 minutes or so and create the Dome of Peace. We're going to approach it a little bit differently today. And I'll take the screen, Alex.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to hear something that Lily brought the last Monday in the Spanish teaching. And this is just a child asking a question in the Kids Knowledge Seekers workshop. And you can hear it for yourselves, but quite distressed. And of course, this Kids Knowledge Seekers workshop, it was the 14th one. It was 2015. The faces have changed. This is probably a small group of the world leaders here, maybe at a G7 conference or somewhere else, but the activity has not yet changed. It's in the process of changing. But again, this emotional disturbance with adults and children, let me just go into it here, and then in a few minutes, we'll take our 5 minutes of silence. Thank you.
Anyway, question 2 comes from Travis. He's a little bit younger than his sister. He says, how come you don't make the bad guys disappear? I live in Houston, Texas, and I'm terrified of ISIS coming and chopping my head off. You said you can stop it. How come you don't?
Who's coming to chop his head off? ISIS.
ISIS. ISIS is in our media out here. Our media is portraying ISIS as the world's evil, and it's on all the time on every news channel, and it's terrifying our school children. That's all.
You know something very interesting? Do you know something very interesting? Let me answer your child in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Keshe Foundation is based in Trani, in what do you call it, south east of Italy, in the southern points nearly. We went out for dinner with Arman and Marco a couple of nights ago to celebrate a good news we had. And not even a stone throw, less than 20 meters, 10 meters from the restaurant, there is a church. It's a church of temples, or what you call crusaders. This church is placed right on the edge of water, more or less, where people went to the church as a man and came out as a crusaders and got on the boat in the back of the church and went to do what the crusaders did. Mayhem, chaos, murder, and the rest of it. In so many ways, we just changed names and religion, or name of praying to God one way or another. Where did the crusaders disappear to? ISIS will disappear in the same direction. Man has chosen the name of God in divisions to create superiority for his own weaknesses. You go back and teach the children why these people, not all of them, but some of them, started this movement. You call them ISIS, I call them crusaders. It's the same word in different time and place. They fought for what, or they fight for what they think is the right and is what it has to be corrected. To bring man to believe in God in their way of thinking. But in essence, there is only one God. Doesn't matter what name you put on it. On this planet, we chose as many names for the God as we have trees on the planet. The children of today has to be taught in a very simple way. They disappear when the world leaders disappear. When there is no world leaders and there is no division in way of praying to God or worshipping the Creator, then there is no difference. There is no ISIS, there is no Crusaders and the rest we've seen. It's not a magic, it's believing and behaving and accepting the world peace. When you're accepting the peace, in time we will see the change in the end of these divisions and things that we create. Most of these people, which especially in America you call them ISIS, look at the guns they carry. Look at the weapon technology they carry. They all come from the most advanced nations. African nations don't make arms. Advanced nations make arms to create, and when the arm is manufactured, has to be sold, and to be a need for it has to be used. Then you attach the name. At the moment, because the Western media has access to whatever we call satellites, the Islamic world has become the curse of the world. But in fact, it's the Christianity who's feed them. They're just a subservient to the master. So ISIS finishes when the world leaders, be it His Excellency President Obama to His Excellency Mr. Putin and the Chinese leader and the Islamic world leaders, say goodbye, pack their bags and live like everybody else in a normal way, that there is no difference between the man. It's the world leaders which create these divisions and these names, and they disappear as soon as they go. The simple way I can tell you how ISIS disappear happened in my lifetime. In 1970s, when I came to England, it was a pleasure to have an Iranian friend. I used to get invited to teas and dinners because we were Persians. 79, we were loved, and 1980 we were the most hated nation through the division of the religion and the man. The nation hasn't changed. And now we see, after some 30 years, now we become one of the leading scientific world organizations in nuclear and the rest, and now we have taken off the terrorist list. So I used to be a very well-loved man. I became a terrorist. Now I've been taken off the terrorist, but I'm still the same man. So it's how the Western media portrays the people for them to be able to divide the rules that they have a leader. If you go in depth in what ISIS stands and how they have come to protect themselves and divide themselves and create all these funny names. It was Bin Laden a few years ago, they killed him, now there's ISIS. Where are the European mercenaries who go and start these things? The problem is with our world leaders, not with our youth and other people. If you teach peace to the same people who carry the gun, there would no ISIS. It's the division we've created. The disappearance comes by the disappearance of the world leaders. Because as long as they want to be a leader, they have to be an enemy for them to be there to protect their nation.
Can you spend
You
a
said
little
America.
time?
Let me tell you something, because this was on the table last night. I had some friends with me.
Okay.
One of the Iranians in Washington took a letter of peace, World Peace Treaty, to the White House. Hand delivered. He listens to the programs, he knows who he is. He went with his son. World Peace Treaty, you all know what it is and what it was accomplished with the letter which went with it. On 23rd of July 2013, some months later, I received a private and exclusive, you have seen it most probably, letter from the most powerful man on this planet, His Excellency President Obama, justifying his action of killing and murdering. Why he had to do this, why he had to kill this, why he has to have such an army to be able to kill and destroy, that they stay a superpower and everything is peace. And as you know, in my talks, I said, I send you the letter of peace and you send me letter of killing and murdering. Two of us cannot meet. We have to teach our children that war, conflict, division, doesn't matter race, color, religion, nationality, is made by men who find a weak to support them, for them to be the bosses, for them to have a position. Murdering, killing in any shape or form is wrong. It should not be there. But you have to understand how they became what they are. They killed their parents, they killed their mothers, they killed their brothers and sisters for a piece of land called Palestine. We saw them, in 45 days, they created $12 billion damage. Where do you want them to go to? They have no home. What happens if somebody comes and kicks you out of your house and destroys the house and take whatever you have? You defend yourself, or you find a way to show your anger. That's what we have. ISIS has created out of injustices of the West and the East. Now, as long as you have access to Fox television, everybody's enemy and American is the best, and the Europeans are the saviors, where in fact they are the creator of the wars. That's why in the coming time you'll understand we end up the kingship and presidentialhood and leadership, because all men are equal. And these people have been the cause of the division. You have to understand how these groups are created. Some of them are maniacs, psychologically demented. We had it in the Crusaders' time, we had it in the time of Persian Empire, we had them in the Roman Empire, and we had them all over the time. We had them in the past century. We called them Hitler. But the people who follow these kind of path of thinking is because they have no way, or they see the way to get to power to become leaders. And when we don't make arms, when we come to what we said, World Peace Treaty, I shall not think about the war, I will not carry arms, then there is nowhere to fight, there is no need to fight. As some of you know, we are pushing through the forces of the technology to enforce peace. And in a very short time, we announced a very significant achievement for the foundation in that path. We gave freely, but our freedom of knowledge sharing has a condition, disarmament. And we will carry a nation with us on this banner very soon. What a lot of people haven't understood is that our generation, your parents and us, are sacrificing not much, but a lot to make sure that the next generation has a peaceful time. And the peace comes from not having the arm. When you don't have a gun, you don't use it. When you learn the process of peace means justice and correctness, you correct yourself so there is no injustice. Then there is no war. Then, if you understand that, then you understand the language of the aliens. Which is peace, a permanent peace and not talk of the peace, because then you will understand your thoughts of war are read long before even you think about it, because you create the fields which lead to that level, what we call arms, fighting, or whatever, or war. Everything has a measure. Once you start measuring it, then you understand where it goes and how it goes. When you're in the sun on the beach, you don't get angry because it's peaceful and pleasure. When you're put in the bus in a tight corner and there's 20 other people sharing 10 seats, then there's a pressure and anger. The man is the same man. It's the environment which we have to create for it to behave correctly all the time. And the Keshe Foundation is in that path to create the environment. This is what I keep on saying. We create the conditions and then we get the result. It's not just to do with the reactors. We are creating the conditions that the man comes to be at peace. And you will see the evolution in the coming literally days and weeks, because he hasn't started. You see. Give from your soul as a child, which is pure and clean, to your world leaders. And then they walk off, they will not even carry the leadership with them. Then the man will come at peace. We passed our time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Keshe. We should
Oh, sorry, I did the same thing, Alex. I was muted while I was talking. But anyway, these are just a few pictures Gianni had shared with us. They were shared in the last week's reactor group, and they were also shared last Monday in the Spanish language community. So I just thought we'd give a visualization of this dome, sort of in the matter state, but probably in the energy state as well. And rather than read both the 181st and the second one, the 216th, One Planet, One Nation, One Race,